I welcome Tomás Saraceno to the HKW talks on the Anthropocene. Welcome, Tomás.
Thank you.
You were presenting in the opening of the Anthropocene Project this week spiders.
Yes. Or webs.
And webs. And webs. So how did you get involved in spiders and webs?
Well, one of the first questions that I was always posing was many astrophysicians and astronomers always, when they try to explain the origin of the universe right after the Big Bang, the analogy that they most use is that it looks like a three-dimensional spider web. Uh-huh. And this has been from them. Then I went to interview Volker Sprinkler at Max Planck Institute, and I say, well, what is this that everybody talk about, a three-dimensional spider web? And then, well, he said it's a recurrent analogy, but actually nobody knows really how is a three-dimensional spider web. This means we started to look more carefully, and then we started to work with Peter Jäger at a Senckenberg Museum, and then this was a project that took me almost 2 years. It was at the time of Venice Biennale, 2009, and then we found out that nobody have ever digitalized and measured every single length of a three-dimensional spider web. And this is by design. Then we build a kind of a scanner together with Technical University in Darmstadt, and together with Peter Jäger, and then finally we end up having the first full data of a three-dimensional spider web. And then, I just came back from MIT. Now there are 2 postdoctoral studies we have 3 scientific papers on the web. This means now we might get closer on the idea.
Yes.
The relationship might be something to do with the universe.
But how did it come that this image or this metaphor became so important for the scientists? Not knowing what it is.
Exactly, but that's what's fascinating me
yes.
also. Every time I got more involved, and I say, oh my God, how could be,
Yeah.
It's like the same like we are, sometimes people say, we know more about space, what would happen in our oceans.
Yes.
And somehow all the time, in our life also, there is no collection of spider web in history. It doesn't mean now the spider web which are there, there are many science museums also who want to have them. This means spider web all the time we have broomed them away from our house with a broom. This means there is this relationship which somehow we might want to, maybe because the space is so far out or how have been formed, which maybe we find analogies which is so close to us, but at the same time we cannot look at it, or we never have looked at it really.
So basically it was to use an image out of the everyday experience to explain planetary dimensions.
Yes. But at the same time, nobody have really took the time. As I said, there is no collection in any museum or science museum about spider webs.
Yes. Yeah.
And the other question also is like, why there is no collection? Maybe, the best, what you could see is like a terrarium where they represent nature again.
Yes.
They put a stone, they put a plant, but it's very different what we have seen. This means there is this kind of inability also from them to say, well, we abstracted from nature, we build a frame, and what is nature today on the age of the Anthropocene? So this means it might come back of the idea. Scientists will say, no, we have to rebuild their natural environment to make a web. But
on the other side, the image of the web is also, for example, used for the internet.
Yes.
And what is interesting is that, exactly the same way that we don't know by experience the planetary dimensions, we don't know by experience really what the internet is. Whereas with the spider web, you have on the one side a very concrete material, you can see it even, you can touch it even, but on the other side is something more. It's not just material, it's also used for communication, for experience. Can you
No, and this is what we were doing here for the first alive concert of a troupe of semi-social spider playing a kind of a hybrid web. This means what we do basically is, I was interested. It's funny because spiders basically are deaf. They could not hear. But they also define it as a kind of the more sensible animal in the world. There was a moment a cockroach. This means all the exoskeleton is vibrating, and every single joint is kind of having 1,000 ears for them. At the same time, are deaf also. This means they don't see what they build, but at the same time, they can perceive exactly when you touch the web in different points. And was a little bit, the challenge is a little bit of maybe try to build an instrument, a musical instrument, try to understand the web as a something that different species and animals can communicate, but at the same time, maybe try to force also how this web have been built. I mean, what we did at the beginning is just we have this carbon frame, and we introduce a solitary spider, and then she make her own web. Majority of all spiders in the world are solitary, are 43,000 minus 20. But there are 20 species which are social spiders. And the social spider, they live all together in one single web, up to 10,000 species. And what we did is and was here at HKW, is we first was a solitary. She made a web, then we took out a spider, female, is a female word, 8 to 2. Yeah. And then we introduced a semi-social or a social colony of spider on top. And this means what was the instrument was kind of a hybrid web, which was built by different generations of spiders, which we usually they will never meet in the world. Because one was from Madagascar, the other one from Argentina, and the other one. And nevertheless, they cooperate. And they use, it's like me moving to your apartment, how much I reaccommodate my house and how much I
So the spider can work with a web he did not produce himself or herself.
Yes, exactly.
What is this notion of semi-social?
Yeah, well, the semi-social are pretty much territorial still. This mean, when you see the web, each have his own nest, and they share a lot of connections. It's like living in an apartment building. Yael Lublin, the director of the Arachnology Society, she explained it each have his own apartment, but you share the electricity, the pipe, the water. This means still you can read it as a single web, you can kind of differentiate a little bit. And also the degrees of sociability, it change. This means they're truly social, but when the space is, and this, let's say, the frame is getting very narrow, and there is lack of food, then they start. You seem pretty human to start.
They start fighting
each other. Yes.
And what does that mean for the web?
I don't know, because I never have the courage to force them to live in a kind of, and I don't know what happened. Many webs for them and for some of the pieces are proteins. This means they eat it. When there is not good enough, they eat the web. And this means some other spiders also we have noticed they don't like so much to eat the web of somebody else, but some are very respectful and really use.
But there are also situations where different kinds of webs get entangled with each other?
Yes, exactly. This was the case, some of the pieces we brought here for the concert. There is a moment that you cannot, you can, well, if you're a little bit with a acute eye, you can see still from which web it came from which species. And then the interesting was at the same time, then we have this hybrid web, and then we introduce a tegenaria, which have not been built any of this web. And she was trying to play a concert. Does it mean communicate with other species through a web which have been built through other species with other thing.
Could one
and
say,
then we were trying to hear it.
Could one say that the web constitutes the space of experience for the spider, or does it experience also the wider world, or is it just the world within or related to the web?
You know, for example, one thing they said, you know, how much, let's say today, pollution or noise in the cities are really affecting the way how the web is built also.
Yes.
Because it's really, that's what, you know, also why the piece somehow was in the scenario, or in the stage. It was not really in the front, no, it was in between the chairs. And then one interest was that even people by breathing and getting very close to the web might influence the way how you build the web. Does it mean, just for give you also like in case of how much the web is shaped by the atmosphere, there's a great sample of Yael Lublin, for example. There was a king, which is funny. There was because spider when they do ballooning, no, and they migrate very far, just by riding the wind currents and the thermics of the wind. They come all the way from Africa to Europe without permission. And this means what they do.
So there's migration going on.
Exactly, and this means they are blind. They don't see nothing. They are deaf. They climb on top of a tree and they start to release a thread, from the spinneret. And the thread, the wind starts to blow, and then when it's long enough and there is enough tension, they release themselves and they cross all the ocean, the Mediterranean.
How can they navigate that?
Exactly. How? Yeah. And when they know when to land, when it's pretty much mercy of the wind. But there is an interesting case to think about the relation what you asked, no, the web. I mean, now they found a very big spider, and they said, well, if this spider is so big, so thick, I don't know, it was 2 grams or something like this, they will need 700 kilometers of thread to being able to fly.
Wow.
One animal. It was impossible because it's too long. This means there was a quiz in science in a couple of years ago. Nobody could understand. What they found out at the end, there are 1,000 spiders come on top of the tree, and each of them start to release. Now the wind and the atmosphere start to weave the web in the air.
Wow.
Because you were asking how
Incredible.
much the web is connected.
Yes.
And this means in all this wind, it make a fabric, which is dense enough, and then thousands of them at the same time can fly, which single alone, none of them could fly. But if we let us fly...
But this is a highly social activity.
Well, not necessarily the one who were flying were social. There's maybe social to fly in a certain moment.
Okay.
But it's like I love this metaphor of the atmosphere and the wind and the thermic, blind, and without knowing where you go, somehow you let it go.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit what we also with Bronislav and what we are working on, the idea of becoming solar and trying to harness the energy of the sun from...
So, normally the development in Western civilization is described as a detachment of the world. So, culture, civilization is you distance yourself from the material world and you become, so to say, as opposed. The material world is opposed to you. What the Anthropocene to some extent implies is that we are much more embedded in natural processes. And to some extent, the web is a representation exactly for that, because it's material but sensitive at the same time.
Yeah, and also but it's sometimes not so direct, no, because you sense vibration, no, you don't hear it, you cannot see it. But it's somehow all the time what it does, it challenges the way how we sense and experience, and we are in the world. It's also sometimes not so direct. You know what I mean? You have to always challenge yourself of the Umwelt and Jakob von Huxley also what he called the Umwelt and because for the spider for them also the medium is so dense as to be if we will be a spider we will be all the time weaving a web underwater. This means the air is so dense for them, and this means the effort that they do to move in the air is like us being underwater. This means really the perception of each different single...
I think this notion of vibration is very interesting. We discussed it last night with
I was in the concert. It was fantastic. And how this vibration... This means, I always think about, the spiders. Let's say the social colony.
Exactly.
You start to dance in a medium, you start to move, and how much you can tune, through this reverberant effect. But, having a kind of an architecture also is very sensitive to the way of how we move.
So, learning from the spiders could mean we look for more vibration processes.
I hope so.
But the mode in Western civilization of looking at the art object is distancing. There is no vibration directly. So, did dealing with the spider web change your notion, your concept of the arts?
This is too complicated question, but let's say it's always strange because it's like when also this spider web became an art object when somehow it's something else. This means I really like it. I work together with the spiders, and then sometimes end up in a art context. Sometimes get up now in a science context. And what is interesting more for me, I think, so is like a when different fields they can come together, and then sometimes you never know what will end up.
So you organize your activities around the spider web, be it more scientific, be it more art oriented.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, here with the concert, I think so. Scientists, since now we really have this knowledge and the scanning process of 3D web, sometimes go really to the engineering and the architecture.
Yes,
and
exactly.
At MIT really get to, how we could improve building construction. And then with David Troop and other, composers, we have inviting also tried to, what we have been doing in the concert also is like maybe we might learn the language of how they talk, how they communicate. This means we have been with a Natural Science Museum. Roland was here in the concert. He brought these lasers. And then we recorded for a couple of months in the studio. Then we give these to some composers, Byron, friend of Oshkan, and Odysseus. And this means what they have been doing is like a kind of recomposing what we could hear from the spiders and then playing back through a pin who was vibrating. And this mean we were trying to talk one to each other. And also, it's like it might turn, if a solitary spider start to be on a social web, it might be turn more social or less social.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is if suddenly you start to live in a kind of a highly social environment, and you might change a bit because the architecture, there is some relationship in regards to this, or through reverberation, because you don't see the environment.
Thomas, we could experience that the spiders, at least for you, provided good vibrations.
Yes. I hope so. I hope so for the rest also.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.